start with Tom Murphy, Capital Cities Broadcasting. Basically, he was just a guy. He got a job at a local broadcast company in, I think, upstate New York, and he just grew it. And you talk about frugality. One thing that's I remember about him is that when they needed to paint headquarters, they only painted the front and the
Right.
sides. They didn't paint the back because no one's in the back who's of importance that they're trying to impress. And why spend the money? So I thought that was interesting. And just a great capital allocator. He had a great operator. We can't forget that. These COOs are
Right.
so important because they allow the capital allocators to do their thing. So he was a team with his partner, and his people loved working for him. And he just grew over and over, making smart acquisitions. One final thing I'll say is that you don't grow unless you invest money. So a lot of people get focused on buybacks and dividends. But if you want a stock to go up 50 times, in a lot of cases, you also need them to spend money. And he did a bunch of acquisitions.
He
So
did
that's what's
one big acquisition. I
yeah,
mean, that's what he's known for, the ABC acquisition in, I think,
at the end. Yeah,
1985,
at the end.
1986.
What
And
stood out
that's
to me with
Buffett.
that one, Karan, is that they basically said he didn't do anything after that for the next decade.
Right.
And I thought that was like a great sign of discipline, because just like we always hear about the managers at Berkshire, like it's very difficult to allocate capital when you're using huge funds. It's difficult to do another acquisition after you've done one of the biggest acquisitions ever. So I thought that discipline was interesting. Anything that stands out to you from the Tom Murphy section?
I think Tom Murphy, the quote that they had in the book, it summarizes him perfectly. It's his quote was, "The goal is not to have the longest train, but to arrive at the station first with the least fuel." And Tom Murphy was able to achieve that. I mean, his focus on keeping costs low and only growing when it really made a lot of sense to go out and acquire. I mean, that's commendable. And Buffett's mentioned Tom Murphy a lot, like in interviews and um, Berkshire meetings, where he's like, yeah, Tom Murphy was a hero to him.
Wow.
And the way he's kind of carried himself and also managed the business, like he's someone who Buffett actually looked up to. So that's saying a lot, about the kind of person that Murphy was when it came to not only managing the business but also capital allocation. So
Yeah, and that's something that's going to stick with me. Like when I hear you tell me that Buffett said Tom Murphy was one of his heroes, Warren Buffett said Tom Murphy was one of his heroes. It's like, what am I doing with my time? Like why am I not Googling Tom Murphy? Why am I not trying to find a Tom Murphy speech? Why am I not trying to find, if they're out there, Tom Murphy letters to investors or interviews or something? So big takeaway for me from this chapter: this is a guy I need to study. And so I'm going to do that going forward.
and even the way he kind of manages his company, like you can see parallels to how Buffett manages Berkshire. Like there was this saying in the book where Murphy kind of decentralizes to the point of anarchy. We see that with Buffett too, where a lot of the business is decentralized, and he's kind of just focusing on taking the cash that's coming from subsidies and reallocating that. So good parallels there.
And I had one other takeaway from both this Capital Cities, but also some of the other managers. There was not an outsider CEO covered in this book that was in the wallpaper industry, Karan. And what I'm saying here is these were industries that were growing. And what I want to point out here is that as an investor, one thing I'm thinking about is like, maybe there's a great manager out there, but to me, the industry still matters. And why, if I have two great managers, they're both doing the right things and doing great things, I'd rather be with the manager that's in a growing industry. And if the industry is going to grow, say the S&P is going to grow at 7%, 8%,
Okay.
I'd rather be with the guy who's in the growing cable industry in the biggest boom the cable industry ever had. Like just that timeline was when they were running things, when it was a growing industry. Same thing with John Malone. I'd rather be with them where the cable industry, number one, outperforms the S&P and grows at, say, like 15%, and the S&P's at 7%, and then these guys do 21 or 22%. Then be with the wallpaper guy, who's like, wallpaper did worse than the S&P, grew at 2%. Somehow the wallpaper guy got his company grow at 8%, and it beat the S&P, but it wasn't even close to these. So what I noticed is some of these CEOs were in just booming industries, Karan, booming. And those industries themselves outperformed the S&P. But then because these guys were great, they did even better than their industry. So